You end up in 2010 starting to play a little bit with gin. Where did that curiosity come from? The gin.
Initially, we'd talked about making tonic water because we thought, we could see overseas there was a bit happening in craft distilling and in gin. And we thought, that's really interesting. We'll never get a license for gin because it's all controlled by the tax office. And it's very hard to get a license. Back then it was anyway. So we thought, we'll never get a license to idiots like us. So tonic water seemed like a good idea. But I couldn't build a soft drink factory. So
why not?
Well, I didn't have the wherewithal to do it. I didn't have the funding to do it.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know how to do it. It wasn't booze, I didn't have anything about it that was overly interesting. It was just what we thought was a good business idea. But also it meant I'd have to make it under contract, so it was a great idea, but I'd be back behind a desk. And the whole idea was I wanted to get my hands dirty. So I just went through the Breaking Bad phase,
The Breaking Bad phase?
My famous Breaking Bad phase was I bought a little glass lab still, a little 3-litre glass still.
Yeah. And
just started playing with distillation of vodka with botanicals, which is essentially all gin is. Yeah. I had to go on a police registry to buy that still because it's the same equipment you would essentially buy, apparently, to make crystal meth.
There you go.
Yeah.
It really could have been a Breaking Bad phase.
Absolutely. That's why we called it the Breaking Bad phase. I had the local copper on my door one day. And I opened the door and he's standing there and he said, "Cam." And I'm like, "Stu, our kids are at school."
Yeah.
He's looking at this list of lab equipment. He's like, "Mate, I know you've got 3 daughters, but we've got to find a better way to pay for it than crystal meth." And I'm like, "No, it's all good. Come in, I'll show you what I'm doing." So, that was sort of how it started, was just those tiny little distillates playing with juniper and then branching out into other things for a couple of years before we got our act together.
And so I've actually got a little bit of a stat here because the Australian gin market has grown to $140 million per year. So you clearly discovered the art of distilling at the right time back in 2010. There was no real big driver, correct me if I'm wrong, of gin and especially craft gin in Australia. So what was that any sort of coincidence or did you plan that?
Oh, it might be more arse than class. I don't know. One of the great things about wine was we were travelling a lot. So we were going over to the US and the UK and we could see other things starting to get some momentum, and one of them was gin. And we had kind of decided to go down that road, and we were comfortable to set up something quite small but scalable. And probably halfway down that road, we came across a brand in the UK called Sipsmith, which is a gin I totally admire, and great guys, great gin. But they started in a garage in the UK, and they had really made some waves in London, in particular in bars in London, and that gave us a bit of confidence that that's a trend that we could see happening here with an Australian distillery. And that's when I was quite terrified. Stu, by this stage, had set up a very good sort of PR communications business in Sydney called Liquid Ideas that specialised in food, booze, hospitality, tourism, these sorts of things. And I was quitting a job with a mortgage and 3 kids and a slightly nervous wife to set up a gin distillery in Australia, which in a wine region in Australia, which just seemed back then probably a bit silly, but we kind of felt it was the right thing to do.
Why?
Well, just no one had done it. Like, not to the extent we were planning. So we were just rightly nervous about it, and you should be nervous. It's pre-race jitters. You should be nervous. If you're not nervous, well, what's the point? Like, I think you got to get your adrenaline going.